the Light Curator. Marina first noticed the lights on her 37th birthday, a Tuesday that had begun ordinary and forgettable as rain tapped gentle Morse code against her bedroom window. Not the usual lights, not the hazy glow of street lamps piercing through mist, or the warm flicker of candles on her modest cake, but the lights that lived inside people, pulsing beneath their skin like captive stars. The barista who handed her a morning latte carried a cinnamon warm amber light that twisted like slow-moving smoke, intensifying to a brilliant copper whenever he laughed with genuine joy. Each spiral of his light seemed to carry the ghost of his laughter even after the sound faded, lingering in the air like the coffee's aroma. Marina had rubbed her eyes, blamed it on birthday melancholy or too little sleep. But the next day, the lights remained, and the day after, until seeing them became as natural as breathing. The baker who sold her sourdough on Sundays radiated a honeyed glow that sent out tiny sunbursts whenever he pressed a free cookie into a child's waiting palm. The warmth of his light seemed to carry the yeasty scent of rising bread, though Marina knew this couldn't be possible. The elderly woman who fed pigeons in the park emanated a silver-blue luminescence that rippled like disturbed water when she laughed, making the air around her seem cooler and clearer. Marina's neighbor, a cellist who played late into the night, carried a deep indigo that swelled and receded with his music, the edges vibrating in time with each note until Marina couldn't tell if she was seeing the music or hearing the light. Marina kept her discovery pressed between her ribs like a secret too precious to share. Instead, she began cataloging what she saw in her grandmother's leather-bound journal, the one with paper that smelled of sandalwood and thyme. Her handwriting changed as she wrote, becoming more fluid, as if the lights themselves were guiding her pen across the page. She noted patterns with meticulous care, how some lights flickered when people felt uncertain, trembling like candle flames in a draft, how others dimmed in crowds, shrinking inward for protection, how a precious few reached outward with tendrils of luminescence that sought connection like plants turning toward the sun. These reaching lights fascinated her most. They seemed to leave trails in the air, gossamer threads that sometimes connected with others, creating momentary bridges of commingled radiance. The beauty of this hidden world, layered over the ordinary one, stole Marina's breath daily, but it also overwhelmed her. Colors too vivid to name pulsed and throbbed in crowded spaces, creating a symphony of light that sometimes left her dizzy and disoriented. She took to wearing round sunglasses with amber lenses, the kind that made the world look dipped in honey and softened the most brilliant flares. "You doing okay?" One Wednesday afternoon, her friend Elise asked as they sat in their usual corner of the cafe, where mismatched chairs and creaking floorboards held stories of 100 years of conversations. Elise's light was a steady moss green, and it emitted a scent reminiscent of rain-soaked earth whenever Marina got too close. Today it reached toward Marina with concerned tendrils. Marina adjusted her sunglasses and curved her lips into what she hoped was a convincing smile. "Just tired," she said, trailing her fingertip through a puddle of spilled sugar on the scarred wooden table. "Worky!" But it wasn't work. Marina's job as a librarian at the small branch library downtown had always been her sanctuary. She loved the particular silence found only in libraries, not an absence of sound, but a presence of quiet, punctuated by the whisper of turning pages, the soft tap of computer keys, the muffled conversations that floated between shelves like dandelion seeds. She loved the scent of books, paper and ink, and the indefinable essence of stories waiting to be discovered. She even loved the feel of them, the varied textures of covers beneath her fingertips, the weight of knowledge or imagination held in her hands. If anything, work had become even more fascinating since the lights appeared. She could almost predict what kinds of books people would enjoy based on the color and quality of their inner radiance. The young man with the nervous, fluttering yellow glow that sparked like static electricity usually left with science fiction, devouring tales of distant worlds and impossible technologies. The woman whose rich emerald light seemed to envelop her like a cloak, carrying the fresh scent of pine needles, preferred historical biographies, her fingers lingering on the faces in photographs as if she could touch the past through them. The teenage girl whose fierce ruby light crackled at the edges like a campfire in wind gravitated toward poetry and feminist theory, each book she selected causing her light to burn brighter as if fed by the words. What truly troubled Marina, what kept her awake during the velvet hours of night when her apartment creaked with settling whispers, was a paradox. Despite her ability to see everyone else's inner light, she remained blind to her own. No matter how she twisted and turned before the mirror in her bathroom where the light was kindest, no matter how many reflective surfaces she checked in storefronts and car windows and the smooth surface of the lake in the park, she saw only herself, ordinary, unremarkable Marina Lockwood, without any surrounding glow. "Maybe I don't have one," she whispered one night. Her breath fogged the mirror while rain tapped on the windows. A hollow feeling settled in her chest. It was an ache that felt like hunger, but deeper and older. "Maybe I'm just empty." 2 months after the lights first appeared, Mr. Chen came into the library on a Tuesday afternoon when sunlight slanted through the tall windows and turned dust motes into dancing galaxies. Marina had known him for years. He was a regular who read mostly travel books and occasionally asked for help printing boarding passes for his frequent trips abroad. His light was one of Marina's favorites, a rich, deep teal that seemed to hold secrets from distant shores, carrying the tang of salt air and the coolness of sea caves. But today, Mr. Chen's light was different. It had dimmed to a pale shadow of its usual vibrancy, more gray than teal, like a tropical sea under heavy clouds. Instead of its smooth, even glow, it pulsed weakly, like a tired heart struggling to maintain its rhythm. The edges, usually crisp and defined, had grown fuzzy and indistinct, occasionally seeming to fray into the air around him. "Good afternoon, Mr. Chen," Marina said, removing her sunglasses despite the momentary sting of fluorescent lights against her sensitive eyes. "Are you looking for anything in particular today?" He smiled, but it didn't touch his eyes, which remained dark as river stones. "Just returning these." He placed 3 books on the counter with hands that trembled almost imperceptibly. Marina noticed his knuckles were more pronounced than she remembered, and his wedding band sat loosely on his finger. Marina scanned the books back into the system, but her eyes kept returning to his diminished light. Before she could stop herself, her concern spilled into words. "Are you feeling all right?" Mr. Chen looked startled, then his shoulders slumped slightly, as if her question had released the tension holding him upright. Is it that obvious? Just intuition, Marina said, mindful of her words to avoid revealing too much. He sighed, a sound like wind through autumn leaves. My wife passed away 15 years ago today. May was everything. The sun, my world revolved around. He looked down at his hands, at the gold band that caught the light. Usually, I travel somewhere new on this date. It was our dream to see the world together. But this year, he gestured vaguely at his knee, which Marina now noticed was slightly swollen beneath his trousers. Doctor says no flying for at least another month. Something about blood clots and cabin pressure. I'm so sorry, Marina said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. She felt his grief like a physical presence between them, heavy as waterlogged wood. She looked at the travel books he'd returned. New Zealand with its impossible green hills, Portugal with its sun-warmed tiles, Vietnam with its mist-shrouded mountains, places he'd visited in his wife's memory, carrying her with him to all the places she'd never see. What was her favorite place? Marina found herself asking, her voice soft as library dust. She never got to travel much, Mr. Chen said, his light flickering with the memory. We were saving for it, but then the cancer came so quickly. He paused, swallowing hard. But she always wanted to see the northern lights, said they must be like seeing magic woven into the sky, like the gods had spilled paint across the darkness. Marina nodded, an idea forming in her mind like a photograph developing in solution. Could you come back tomorrow? Around closing time? Mr. Chen looked puzzled, the edges of his light rippling with curiosity, but he agreed before shuffling toward the exit, his cane tapping a melancholy rhythm against the floor. That night, Marina stayed late at the library, long after the last patron had left and the building had settled into its nighttime creaks and whispers. She gathered every book they had with photographs of the aurora borealis, spreading their glossy pages across tables in the reference section. She borrowed a small projector from the children's reading room, the one they used for shadow puppet shows on Saturday mornings. She found soft instrumental music that reminded her of starlight and snow, of vast open spaces where silence had texture and weight. And she wrote snippets of poetry about the lights that dance at the edge of the world, scientific explanations about solar particles and magnetic fields, legends from cultures who viewed the aurora as spirits dancing across the sky, as the breath of ancestors, as bridges to other worlds. When Mr. Chen arrived the next evening, coming through the door as Marina was turning the sign from open to closed, she led him to a small reading room at the back of the library. She'd cleared the furniture, except for 2 comfortable chairs facing one wall. "What's all this?" he asked, his diminished light pulsing with confusion. "Just something I thought might help," Marina said, suddenly shy in the face of her own impulse. "Sit, please." She dimmed the main lights until darkness wrapped around them like a blanket. With a deep breath, she started the projector and the music simultaneously. Instantly, the walls came alive with slowly shifting waves of green and purple light that moved with liquid grace across the plain white surface. The music, all strings and space and yearning, filled the small room with its crystalline beauty. Marina began to read from the pages she'd prepared, her voice soft but clear in the darkened room, giving Mr. Chen facts and poetry and legend in equal measure. The Sami people of northern Scandinavia believed the lights were the energies of departed souls, she read. The Finnish called them revantulet, fox fires, believing they were caused by a magical fox sweeping its tail across the snow, sending sparks into the night sky. For 20 minutes, they sat in that makeshift aurora, letting the lights wash over them as Marina's words built a bridge between present and memory, between loss and beauty. When she finally turned the regular lights back on, setting the dimmer to a gentle glow, she gasped quietly. Mr. Chen's light had changed. It wasn't back to its full teal brilliance, but new threads of violet had appeared, weaving through the dimness like hope finding its way through grief. These new strands pulsed with a different rhythm, stronger and more certain, and carried a scent like night-blooming flowers. "Thank you," he said simply, his eyes damp with unshed tears that caught the light. May would have loved this. He reached out and squeezed Marina's hand, his palm warm and dry against her skin. "You have a gift for seeing what people need." After he left, Marina stood in the empty library, her heart so full it felt bruised. She hadn't planned it, hadn't thought it through. She'd just followed an impulse to help, to ease someone's pain in whatever small way she could. She caught her reflection in the darkened window and stared, transfixed. For just a moment, so brief she might have imagined it, she thought she saw a flicker of light around her own form. Not a color she could name, but a presence. A gentle radiance that smelled faintly of old books and possibility. Then it was gone, and she was just Marina again, ordinary in the extraordinary silence of the library after hours. But something had shifted inside her, like furniture rearranged in a familiar room. Maybe, she thought as she gathered her things to leave, the light isn't something you can see in yourself. Maybe it's something you can only feel, or something that only appears when you're not looking for it, when you've forgotten yourself in the act of reaching toward another. In the weeks that followed, Marina found herself paying closer attention to the lights that dimmed or flickered, that shrunk inward or fragmented at the edges. The college student, whose usually vibrant orange had dulled to a murky rust. His shoulders curved inward as if carrying an invisible weight. The middle-aged woman whose silvery glow had shrunk until it barely extended beyond her skin, her eyes darting nervously whenever the library door opened. The child whose normally exuberant rainbow light had simplified to a single trembling blue. Marina didn't always know how to help. She wasn't a therapist or a doctor or a miracle worker. She didn't have solutions for grief or anxiety or loneliness, but she found that small things often made a difference in ways she could see immediately in the shifting quality of people's lights, recommending exactly the right book at the right time, not the one they asked for, but the one their light seemed to reach for on the shelves, listening without judgment when they needed to talk. Sometimes, just acknowledging someone's presence with genuine warmth, with the simple gift of being fully seen. And occasionally, in unguarded moments, she glimpsed her own light in fleeting reflections, after she'd spent an hour helping a child find books that wouldn't make his classmates tease him for his reading level, his light changing from embarrassed pink to a more confident marigold. After she'd run into the rain to return a wallet left behind by a distracted mother with 3 children in tow, the woman's light suddenly brightening from stressed amber to relieved gold. After she'd stayed late to teach an elderly patron how to use email to see photos of her new grandchild, her tremulous lavender light solidifying into joyful plum. In these moments, caught in rain-spattered shop windows or the polished brass of the library door handles, Marina would see herself haloed in a light that changed each time, sometimes cream gold like morning sun through linen curtains, sometimes deeper like amber with ancient insects trapped inside, sometimes opalescent with shifting hints of color that defied categorization. The light was always gone when she tried to look directly at it, evaporating like dew under direct sun. But Marina began to understand that maybe the magic wasn't in seeing the light, it was in feeling it grow, in the subtle expansion beneath her ribs when she connected genuinely with another person. "You seem different lately," Elise said over their regular coffee, her green light reaching across the table to twine briefly with whatever light Marina might be carrying. Happier, somehow. More present. Marina smiled and realized she'd left her sunglasses at home and didn't miss them. The lights around her didn't overwhelm her anymore. They'd become a natural part of how she saw the world, as integral as shadow and perspective. "I've just been figuring some things out," she said, wrapping her hands around her mug to absorb its warmth. "Well, it suits you," Elise replied, her head tilted in assessment. "You're practically glowing." Marina laughed at the unintentional accuracy, but her friend's casual observation lingered like perfume on a scarf. That evening, she wrote in her journal, not about others' lights as had become her habit, but about the moments when she felt most alive, most herself, most connected to the world around her. The entries filled page after page, her handwriting loosening as she wrote, becoming almost luminous in its flow across the cream-colored paper. 6 months after Marina first noticed the lights, a new patron came to the library on an afternoon when spring was making its first tentative appearance. Crocuses pushed through the soil in defiance of lingering frost, and sunlight had begun to remember its own warmth. He was tall, with silver-threaded dark hair and glasses that kept sliding down his nose, which he would push back up with an absent-minded gesture that spoke of long habit. His light was unlike any Marina had seen before, a mosaic of colors that shifted and changed as he moved, never settling into a single hue, but flowing from indigo to crimson to gold to emerald like oil on water. Marina found it both beautiful and unsettling, impossible to categorize or predict. "Excuse me," he said, approaching her desk with a step that suggested he was used to moving quietly. His voice matched this impression, soft but clear, the kind of voice that would be good for reading aloud. "I'm looking for a book on synesthesia." Marina directed him to the psychology section, watching as his kaleidoscope light rippled when he thanked her, scattering prisms across the circulation desk like shattered glass. When he returned with several books, placing them carefully on the counter, she couldn't help but ask, "Research project?" "Personal interest," he said with a small smile that seemed to hold secrets. "I'm Daniel, by the way, new in town, just moved from Colorado. Marina, welcome to our little library. She stamped the due date in each book, an old-fashioned touch the library maintained despite its computerized system. He hesitated, fingers tapping a restless rhythm on the book covers. Then, as if coming to a decision, he asked, "This might sound strange, but do you ever see things? Colors around people, maybe?" Marina's heart skipped, then raced to catch up. She studied him carefully, taking in the earnest expression behind his glasses, the way his unusual light seemed to hold its breath, waiting. "What would you say if I did?" Daniel smiled, relief evident in the way his shoulders dropped and his light brightened, sending out celebratory sparks of gold and violet. "I'd say you're the first person I've met who might understand what it's like. These colors appeared about 6 months ago for me. Been driving me half crazy, trying to figure out what's happening." 6 months, Marina echoed, the coincidence wrapping around her like a shawl, the same time her own ability had manifested. "Did anything unusual happen when you first started seeing them?" Daniel's light swirled thoughtfully. "I was at a concert, Bach's Cello Suites, during the prelude to Suite number 1. It was like a veil lifted. Suddenly, I could see this golden light pouring from the cellist's hands, from her heart. I thought it was just the beauty of the music affecting me. But the next day, everyone I saw had colors around them." "What about you?" "My birthday," Marina said. "Ordinary day otherwise. Woke up, and the world had changed." Over the next several weeks, Daniel became a regular at the library, his ever-changing light becoming a familiar presence Marina found herself looking forward to. They exchanged theories about the lights. Daniel called them auras, a term Marina had avoided because it sounded too new age for her practical nature. They compared notes on colors and what they might mean, combining Marina's careful observations with Daniel's more intuitive interpretations. And they discovered they weren't alone. Daniel had found an online forum of others who had suddenly developed the same ability all around the same time, as if a switch had been flipped somewhere in the collective human experience. "What do you think it means?" Marina asked one evening as they walked through the park after the library closed. The spring air was soft with promise, carrying the scent of damp earth and new green growing things. The lights of passersby created a gentle kaleidoscope around them, couples with lights that reached toward each other, children with exuberant bursts of color that extended far beyond their small bodies, solitary walkers with more contained glows that spoke of private thoughts and inner worlds. "I don't know," Daniel admitted, pausing to watch a robin tug a worm from recently thawed ground. His mosaic light settled momentarily into a contemplative blue. "But I've noticed something. Have you ever seen your own light?" Marina shook her head, scattering the day's collected tension. "Only glimpses, never when I'm looking for it. It's like trying to catch mist in your hands." "Same here," he said, his expression softening. "But I've developed a theory." He stopped walking and turned to face her, his height requiring her to tilt her head back slightly to meet his eyes. "What if we can't see our own light because it's not meant for us? What if the purpose of seeing others' lights is to help us recognize what they need? Like some kind of cosmic empathy upgrade?" Marina said with a small laugh that caught in her throat. Something like that, Daniel agreed, his light swirling with blues and golds in the twilight, sending out tendrils that danced just beyond the edges of Marina's personal space. I used to be so caught up in my own head. Mathematician by training, I dealt in abstracts, not people. Then the lights appeared, and suddenly I couldn't ignore the humanity around me anymore. Couldn't pretend we're all just separate entities moving through space. The connections became visible. Marina thought about how her own life had changed, how she'd gone from observing the lights with clinical distance to actively responding to them, about the journal pages filled with moments of genuine connection. It's changed how I interact with the world, she admitted. Made me more aware of the impact we have on each other, even in small moments. Exactly, Daniel said, his light brightening with enthusiasm. And maybe that's the whole point. Maybe it's not about seeing the lights. It's about what we do because we can see them. As they continued walking, the path curving around the small lake where ducks created ripples like thoughts moving across a mind, their hands brushed accidentally, then deliberately found each other. Marina felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the mild evening air and everything to do with the way Daniel's ever-changing light seemed to harmonize with whatever invisible radiance she herself might carry. On the 1-year anniversary of when Marina first saw the lights, she planned a special event at the library. She called it the Light Exchange, a gathering where people brought something that had brought them joy or comfort to share with others. The idea had come from months of watching people's lights respond to moments of connection and generosity. Marina had noticed how giving seemed to strengthen both the giver's and receiver's light, creating bridges of luminescence between people that sometimes lingered for hours afterward, connecting them across space like invisible telephone wires. The library meeting room buzzed with conversation and laughter. Morning light streamed through tall windows, catching dust motes and turning them to gold, illuminating the faces of community members who had become more than just patrons to Marina over the past year. Mr. Chen had brought travel photographs and stories that transported listeners to distant shores. Elise shared her grandmother's recipes, the scent of cardamom and cinnamon filling the air from samples she'd baked that morning. The teenage girl with the fierce red light read original poems that made the room fall silent with their raw beauty, her light extending outward with each verse as if her words were physically claiming space. Daniel demonstrated simple math tricks that delighted children and adults alike. His kaleidoscope light particularly mesmerizing as he moved among the tables. Marina moved through the gathering like a curator through a living museum, watching the play of lights around each person. Some lights she recognized had grown stronger over the months she'd known them. Others had changed in quality or color as their owners had faced challenges or discoveries. All of them seemed to reach out in this space, creating a web of interconnected radiance that filled the room like a living, breathing entity. Near the end of the evening, as the gathering was beginning to disperse, an elderly woman Marina didn't recognize approached her. Her light was a gentle violet, so pale it was almost white, with decades of memories shimmering within its depths like fish beneath ice. It carried the scent of lavender, and old pearls, of letters kept in cedar boxes and rain-washed windows. "This was a wonderful idea," the woman said, her voice carrying the slight tremor of age, but none of its uncertainty. "I haven't felt this connected to my community in years." "I'm glad you enjoyed it," Marina replied, noticing how the woman's light seemed to pulse in time with her own heartbeat. The woman tilted her head, studying Marina with keen eyes the color of rain clouds. "You can see them, can't you? The lights around people." Marina froze, her breath catching. It's all right," the woman said gently, reaching out to pat Marina's hand with fingers twisted by arthritis, but still strong. "I could see them when I was younger. They faded as I got older. Most gifts do. But sometimes, on special nights like this, I catch glimpses again." "Can you see your own?" Marina couldn't help asking, the question that had haunted her for a year finally finding voice. The woman smiled, creating a constellation of wrinkles around her eyes that spoke of a lifetime of finding joy in small things. "Not directly, but here," she led Marina to where a large window reflected the room behind them. The glass turned mirror-like against the evening darkness outside. In the reflection, the gathering was transformed into a sea of mingled light, colors flowing and blending like a living impressionist painting. And there, in the reflection, Marina stood wrapped in a light of her own, a warm, radiant gold threaded through with strands of every color she had ever observed in others. It shifted and changed as she watched, responding to her surprise with bursts of white like silent fireworks. "You see," the woman said softly, "your light is made of all the connections you've formed, all the understanding you've developed, all the compassion you've shown. It's not separate from others' light, it's in conversation with it. That's why it's so hard to see on your own. It exists between, not within." Marina stared at her reflection, at the beautiful interplay of her light with those around her, at the way it reached for Daniel's across the room, creating a bridge of gold and kaleidoscope color. For the first time, she understood. She'd been looking for her light as if it were a possession, something contained and limited to her own being. But it wasn't. Her light existed in relationship, in the spaces between herself and others, in the ways she reached out and allowed others to reach her. "Thank you," Marina whispered, her voice rough with emotion. The woman patted her hand again. "Keep doing what you're doing, Lantern Keeper. The world needs people who can see beyond the surface." Then she slipped away into the crowd with surprising grace, her pale violet light leaving a lingering trace like the memory of music. Later, as Marina and Daniel closed up the library, the last of the guests having departed into the gentle spring night, she told him about the encounter. "Lantern Keeper," Daniel repeated, testing the words. "I like that. It fits you." Marina smiled, feeling the rightness of it settle into her bones. "I used to think seeing the lights was the gift, but it's not about seeing them. It's about responding to them, about recognizing that we're all carrying these inner worlds that need acknowledgement. And sometimes a guide," Daniel added, his ever-changing light swirling contentedly as he took her hand, the colors between them blending into something new and unnamed. Outside, the stars were emerging in the clear night sky, pinpricks of ancient light finally reaching human eyes After journeys of inconceivable distance, Marina looked up at them, thinking about light traveling across vast darkness, connecting distant points in the void. Some of those stars had burned out long ago, but their light continued to journey, continued to matter. "We should do this again," she said, meaning the gathering. "Definitely," Daniel agreed, squeezing her hand. "Maybe monthly?" Marina nodded, already imagining future gatherings, future connections, future lights joining the constellation they had begun to create. She couldn't always see her own light, but she could feel it, steady and warm within her, growing stronger with each genuine connection, each moment of understanding. And really, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.